The war lasted 11 days. 11 days to end everything humanity had built over thousands of years. The Valan Empire came from the stars with ships that blocked out the sun and weapons that turned cities to ash. Earth's armies fought bravely, but bravery means nothing against an enemy who sees you as insects. 5 years had passed since the conquest. Kang Do-hun remembered the old world sometimes, usually in dreams. He remembered his small apartment in Busan, his engineering job at the shipyard, his mother's cooking on Sunday evenings. All of it was gone now. His mother was gone too, taken in the first wave of slave transports. He never learned where they sent her. Now Do-hun lived in the maintenance tunnels beneath the Imperial Palace on the Valan homeworld. The planet had no name that human tongues could speak, so the slaves simply called it the Center. It was the heart of an empire that stretched across 3 galaxies, home to the Emperor and his court, and Do-hun's prison for the past 3 years. He was 28 years old, though he looked older. Hard work and poor food had carved lines into his face. His hands were rough and scarred from plasma burns and chemical exposure. He wore the gray uniform of a maintenance slave, marked with the symbol that meant human in the Valan language. The symbol looked almost like a cage. Do-hun's job was simple. He crawled through the tunnels that ran beneath the palace, cleaning the plasma conduits and repairing the systems that the Valan considered too dirty to touch. It was dangerous work. The conduits ran hot enough to melt skin, and the chemicals used to clean them could blind a man if he was careless. 3 humans had died in the tunnels since Do-hun arrived. Their bodies were removed and their names were forgotten. The Valan did not keep records of dead slaves, but Do-hun had survived. He was good at his job, good at staying quiet, good at being invisible. He had learned that survival meant never drawing attention. He fixed what was broken, he kept his head down, and he waited for nothing because hope was a luxury slaves could not afford. On the morning that changed everything, Do-hun was repairing a water recycler in Tunnel 7. The machine served the slave quarters, providing drinking water for over 200 humans. It had been broken for 3 days, and the slaves had been drinking from emergency reserves that were nearly empty. The recycler was not Do-hun's responsibility. It belonged to another section, another crew. But the crew assigned to fix it had been sent to a different project, and no one else seemed to care that humans were going thirsty. So Do-hun had taken parts from other machines, worked through the night, and fixed it himself. He was finishing the repairs when the overseer found him. Valan overseers were chosen for their cruelty. This one was named something that sounded like rocks grinding together. Do-hun called him the Stone in his mind. The stone was tall even for a Valan, with gray skin and 4 eyes that never seemed to blink. He looked at Do-hun the way a person might look at a rat in their kitchen. "What are you doing here, human?" Do-hun kept his eyes on the floor. Looking directly at a Valan was considered disrespectful, sometimes punishable by beating. "Repairing the water recycler, overseer. This is not your section. This is not your machine. The machine was broken, overseer. The humans in the quarters needed water." The stone made a sound that might have been laughter. "The humans needed water, and you decided to fix it yourself, without permission, without authorization." Do-hun felt cold fear spreading through his chest. He had made a mistake. He had drawn attention. "I only wanted to help, overseer." "You wanted to help?" The stone grabbed Do-hun by the collar and dragged him out of the tunnel. "I know what you wanted. You wanted to sabotage our systems. You wanted to cause a malfunction that would spread through the palace." "No, overseer, I would never—" "Silence!" The stone threw Do-hun against the wall. "I have been watching you, human. Always creeping through the tunnels. Always touching things that do not belong to you. I know your kind. You pretend to be obedient, but inside you are planning, waiting, scheming." 2 more Valan guards appeared. They wore the black armor of the palace security force and carried shock sticks that could stop a human heart with one touch. "This slave was attempting sabotage," the stone announced. "Take him to the execution yard." Do-hun's legs went weak. The execution yard was a platform near the palace gates where slaves were killed in public as a warning to others. He had seen humans die there, screaming and begging, while the Valan watched without emotion. "Please," he heard himself say, "I was only fixing the machine. I swear on my life I was only trying to fix it." The stone smiled. It was not a kind smile. You will swear on your death, human. The guards grabbed Do-hoon's arms and began dragging him down the corridor. He did not fight. Fighting was pointless. Fighting only made the death slower and more painful. But his mind raced, searching for something, anything that might save him. They turned a corner and stopped. A Valen woman stood in the corridor. She was unlike any Valen Do-hoon had seen before. Her skin was pale silver instead of gray, and her eyes were gold like melted metal. She wore robes of deep blue that marked her as royalty, and she carried herself with the easy confidence of someone who had never been afraid of anything in her life. Queen Yuna, the youngest daughter of the emperor. Even slaves knew her name. The guards immediately released Do-hoon and dropped to their knees. The stone bowed so low his forehead nearly touched the floor. "Your Highness," the stone said, "forgive us for blocking your path. We are removing a saboteur for execution." Queen Yuna looked at Do-hoon. Her golden eyes studied him the way a scientist might study an interesting specimen. Do-hoon kept his eyes down, but he could feel her gaze like heat on his skin. "Saboteur." Her voice was calm, almost musical. "What did he sabotage?" "The water recycler in Tunnel 7, Your Highness. He was found tampering with it." "Tampering?" The queen stepped closer to Do-hoon. She was tall, nearly 2 meters, and she smelled like something sweet and alien. "Look at me, human!" Do-hoon raised his eyes. It was terrifying to meet a Valen's gaze, let alone a queen's. But her expression was not angry. It was curious. "Did you sabotage the machine?" "No, Your Highness." Do-hoon's voice shook. "I repaired it. It was broken for 3 days. The humans in the quarters had no water. I fixed it." "He lies," the stone hissed. "Does he?" Queen Yuna tilted her head. "I walked past Tunnel 7 this morning. I heard the recycler running. It sounded healthy to me." She turned to the stone. "Did you check whether the machine was actually damaged before accusing this human?" The stone's 4 eyes blinked rapidly. "Your Highness, Did you check?" Silence. The stone could not lie to royalty. "No, Your Highness." "Then check now. If the machine is sabotaged, execute the human. If the machine is repaired, execute yourself for wasting my time with false accusations." The stone went very still. Do-hoon watched the overseer's face twist with fear and rage. But there was nothing the stone could do. A queen's word was law. "The machine may have been repaired, Your Highness. Then this human did you a favor." Queen Yuna waved her hand. "Release him. Return him to his duties." The guards let go of Do-hoon's arms. The stone stared at him with pure hatred, but said nothing. Queen Yuna had already turned away, walking down the corridor as if nothing had happened. But at the last moment she looked back. Her golden eyes met Do-hoon's one more time. "You hum while you work," she said. "Earth songs. I have heard you in the tunnels." She smiled just slightly. "You have a nice voice, human." Then she was gone. Do-hoon stood frozen in the corridor, his heart pounding, his mind struggling to understand what had just happened. A queen of the Valan Empire had saved his life. A queen had noticed him, remembered him, protected him. He did not know why. He did not know what it meant. But for the first time in 5 years, Kang Do-hoon felt something that scared him more than death. He felt hope. It started on a colony world at the edge of Valan space. Workers reported feeling tired, weak, unable to focus. Within days, they stopped eating. Within weeks, their bodies began to rot from the inside while they were still alive. The disease had no cure, no treatment, no mercy. The Valan called it the hollow rot. The plague spread faster than anyone expected. It jumped from world to world on trading ships and military transports. By the time the Emperor ordered quarantine, it was already too late. 30 billion Valan were infected. Millions were dying every day. Do-hoon learned about the plague from whispers in the slave quarters. The humans were not affected by the hollow rot. Their biology was too different, too primitive in Valan eyes. But they watched their masters suffer with complicated emotions. Some felt satisfaction. The Valan had conquered Earth, enslaved humanity, killed billions. Let them feel pain for once. But others, like Do-hoon, felt something closer to worry. The Valan were cruel masters, but they were also the only thing keeping humans alive. If the Empire fell, what would happen to the slaves scattered across 1,000 worlds? The Emperor grew desperate. He summoned scientists from every corner of his domain, including the conquered species. Valen researchers had failed to find a cure, so perhaps the lesser races would have ideas the superior minds had missed. A team of human doctors was brought to the palace. They were given a small laboratory, limited supplies, and a simple order: find a cure or die trying. Dohun did not know the doctors personally, but he knew their leader by reputation. Dr. Park Yoonji was 73 years old. Before the conquest, she had been one of Earth's greatest medical researchers. She had cured diseases that baffled other scientists. She had saved millions of lives. Now she was a slave like everyone else. But the fire in her had never gone out. For 3 months, the human team worked without rest. They slept in shifts, ate at their desks, and pushed their bodies to the breaking point. The Valen gave them almost nothing to work with. They had to build equipment from scraps, run tests with borrowed materials, and fight for every small resource. Dohan helped when he could. His maintenance tunnels ran beneath the laboratory, and sometimes he would slip the doctors extra water or food stolen from Valen's storage. It was dangerous, but it felt right. These were his people, fighting for survival in their own way. In the end, it was human stubbornness that saved the empire. Dr. Park discovered that human gut bacteria produced an enzyme that could neutralize the hollow rot. The bacteria were common in human digestive systems, considered primitive and worthless by Valen standards. But when modified and injected into Valen patients, they destroyed the plague from within. The cure worked. Within weeks, the death rate dropped. Within months, the hollow rot was contained. 30 billion Valen owed their lives to a 73-year-old human woman and her team of slaves. The emperor had no choice. Ancient Valen law demanded that great service be rewarded. To ignore the law would make him appear weak, and weakness was death in Velen politics. So he summoned Dr. Park to the throne room and prepared to grant humanity a prize. Dohun was not present for this moment. He heard about it later, from other slaves who had been cleaning the throne room that day. But the story spread through the human population like wildfire, told and retold until everyone knew it by heart. Dr. Park entered the throne room alone. She was small, frail, her hair completely white and her face lined with age. But she walked without fear. She had looked death in the eye too many times to be scared of an emperor. The throne room was vast, large enough to hold 1,000 Valen nobles. They watched the human with disgust, unable to believe that such a weak creature had saved their species. The emperor sat on a throne of black metal, his face hidden behind a mask of gold. Beside him stood his children, Prince Taiwan, the eldest son, and Queen Yuna, the youngest daughter. "Human," the emperor said. His voice echoed through the chamber. "You have served the empire. By ancient law, I offer you a reward. Name your desire, within reason, and it shall be granted." The nobles expected Dr. Park to ask for better food, warmer quarters, perhaps a few days of rest. They expected her to grovel and thank the emperor for his mercy. They expected her to know her place. They did not know Dr. Park. The old woman stood straight and looked at the emperor without fear. "Your Majesty," she said, "I ask for nothing for myself. My life is nearly over. Whatever time I have left means little." The emperor leaned forward. "Then what do you want?" "I want something for my people, but I know that any broad request will be twisted or denied. I am not foolish enough to ask for freedom or equality, so I ask for something small instead." Dr. Park turned and looked at Queen Yuna. "I ask that Queen Yuna be permitted to choose one human to serve as her personal advisor, with all the rights and protections that position would provide." Silence fell over the throne room. Then the shouting began. The nobles roared with outrage. A human as advisor to a queen? Unthinkable. Impossible. An insult to every Valen who had ever lived. Prince Taiwan's face twisted with fury. He stepped forward to protest, but his father raised a hand for silence. "Interesting," the emperor said. His masked face revealed nothing. "You ask me to give my daughter a pet. I ask you to give your daughter a voice," Dr. Park replied. "A voice that understands humans. We are part of your empire now, whether you like it or not. Billions of us serve across your worlds. Perhaps it is time someone in the royal family learned to understand us." The emperor was quiet for a long moment. The nobles held their breath. Queen Yuna's golden eyes were wide with surprise, but she said nothing. Finally, the Emperor laughed. It was a cold sound, like ice cracking. You are clever, human. Too clever for a slave. But I admire cleverness. He turned to his daughter. Yuna, do you want a human advisor? Queen Yuna hesitated. Every eye in the room was on her. Her brother glared at her with naked hatred. The nobles waited for her to refuse, to reject this absurd gift. Yes, father, she said. I do. More shouting, more outrage. But the emperor had already decided. He waved his hand, silencing the room. Then choose any human in the empire. They will be brought to you. Queen Yuna did not hesitate. She had been thinking about this moment for months, ever since she saved a maintenance worker in a corridor and heard him humming songs from a dead world. The human called Kang Dohun, she said. He works in the maintenance tunnels beneath this palace. I choose him. That night, guards came to the slave quarters. Dohun was sleeping on his thin mat, dreaming of Earth, when rough hands grabbed him and dragged him into the light. He was sure he was going to die. The stone had finally found a way to take revenge. Instead, they brought him to a room he had never seen before. It was clean and warm, with a real bed and a window that showed the alien stars. A servant gave him new clothes, soft and white, nothing like the gray uniform of a slave. A doctor examined him, treating wounds and illnesses he had ignored for years. And then Queen Yuna came. She stood in the doorway, tall and silver and impossible. Her golden eyes studied him with that same curiosity he remembered from the corridor. Do you know why you are here? She asked. No, Your Highness. Dohun's voice was barely a whisper. I chose you, Queen Yuna said. Out of every human in the Empire, I chose you to be my advisor, my voice of humanity. She stepped closer. Dr. Park gave us this gift, but she gave it to me specifically because she believed I would use it wisely. Do you understand what that means? Dohun shook his head. He understood nothing. His world had turned upside down in a single night. Queen Yuna smiled. It was a strange expression on a Valan face, but it seemed almost warm. It means we have work to do, Kang Dohun. The Empire does not know it yet, but things are about to change. She turned and walked away, leaving him alone in his new room with his new clothes and his new life. Dohun sat on the edge of the bed. His hands were shaking. He had been a slave this morning. Now he was an advisor to a queen. He did not know if this was a miracle or a trap, but as he looked out the window at the endless stars, he thought of Dr. Park. A 73-year-old woman had walked into the throne room and demanded a future for her people. She had used her moment of power not to save herself, but to plant a seed. Maybe, Dohun thought, he could help that seed grow. Maybe hope was not so foolish after all. Not physical torture. The Valan did not beat Dohun or starve him. In fact, they treated him better than any human had been treated since the conquest. He had a warm room, good food, and clean clothes. He had access to the palace gardens and the royal library. He was by every measure living the life of a noble, but Dohun trusted none of it. Every morning he woke up expecting guards to burst through his door. Every meal he checked for poison. Every conversation with Queen Yuna, he searched for the trap, the trick, the hidden cruelty that would reveal this had all been a game. He had spent 5 years learning that Valan could not be trusted. One act of kindness could not erase that. Queen Yuna seemed to understand his fear. She did not push him to speak openly or share his thoughts. Instead, she gave him simple tasks. She asked him to review documents about human labor camps, to check supply reports, to identify problems in the systems that manage human slaves across the empire. It was boring work, but it was also revealing. Dohun began to see how the empire truly operated. The cruelty was not random. It was organized, systematic, efficient. Humans were assigned values based on their skills. They were moved like pieces on a game board, sent wherever the empire needed them most. Families were separated without thought. Lives were ended without record. But Dohun also saw something else: weakness. The systems were old, built centuries ago when the Valan first began conquering other species. They were full of holes, errors, and corruption. Valan overseers stole resources meant for slaves. Commanders falsified reports to hide their failures. The empire was so large that no one could see everything, and in the shadows, rot was spreading. Do-hoon began taking notes. At first it was just for himself. Then he started showing his findings to Queen Yuna. She read his reports with genuine interest. Unlike other Valen, she asked questions. She wanted to understand not just what was happening, but why. Why did humans resist when resistance only brought punishment? Why did they help each other when helping was forbidden? Why did they keep their culture alive in secret songs and hidden stories? "You are strange creatures," she told Do-hoon one evening. They were sitting in her private study surrounded by books in languages Do-hoon could not read. "Every species we have conquered eventually breaks. They forget who they were. They become what we make them. But humans refuse to forget." "Forgetting is dying," Do-hoon said. It was the most honest thing he had ever told her. If we forget Earth, we have nothing left. Even when remembering brings pain, especially then, the pain reminds us we are still alive. Queen Yuna was quiet for a long moment. Her golden eyes seemed to look through him, into something deeper. "I chose you because of what I saw in the tunnels," she finally said. "You were kind when kindness cost you everything. You helped other humans, even though it put you in danger. You did not beg for your life when facing death. You simply stood and waited." Do-hoon felt his face grow warm. "I was terrified." "Yes, but you did not let the terror control you. That is rare." She leaned forward. "I have advisors who are brilliant. I have advisors who are powerful. I have advisors who tell me exactly what I want to hear. But I have none who are truly good. None who would risk their lives to fix a water recycler for people they barely knew." "It was just a machine," Do-hoon said. "It was never about the machine." Queen Yuna stood and walked to the window. Outside, the alien sky was dark with strange stars. "My people have ruled this empire for 1,000 years. We have conquered hundreds of species, built wonders that span galaxies, and created a civilization that will last forever. But somewhere along the way, we forgot something important." "What?" "That power is not the same as strength. That ruling is not the same as leading." She turned back to face him. "I want to change the empire, Kang Do-hoon. Not destroy it, not overthrow my father, not start a revolution. I want to change it from within. Make it better, more just, more worthy of lasting forever." Do-hoon stared at her. He could not tell if she was sincere or simply very good at lying. "Why tell me this? I am just a human. I have no power." "You have something more valuable than power," Queen Yuna said. "You have perspective. You see things my people cannot see. You know things we refuse to learn." She crossed the room and stood before him. "I am asking you to help me, Do-hoon. Not as a slave, not as an advisor, but as a partner. Help me understand humanity. Help me build something better." Do-hoon wanted to refuse. He wanted to go back to his tunnels, to his quiet life, to the safety of invisibility. He did not want to be a partner to a queen. He did not want to be responsible for his entire species. But he thought of the humans in the labor camps, the children who would never see Earth, the elderly who died alone in alien fields. He thought of his mother, lost somewhere in the vastness of the empire. He thought of all the humans who had no voice, no hope, no future. "I will help you," he said, "but I do not trust you. Not yet." Queen Yuna smiled. "Good. Trust must be earned. I intend to earn yours." The weeks that followed were difficult. Do-hoon and Queen Yuna worked together on small projects, testing each other, learning each other's limits. She taught him about Valen politics, the complicated web of alliances and rivalries that kept the emperor in power. He taught her about human nature, the dreams and fears and stubborn hope that kept his people alive. But they were not alone in the palace. Prince Taiwan, Queen Yuna's elder brother, watched them with hatred in his eyes. He was next in line for the throne, and he saw his sister's human advisor as an insult to everything the Valen stood for. He made no secret of his disgust. He called Do-hoon the pet and refused to address him directly. He whispered to the nobles that Queen Yuna had been corrupted by her fascination with lesser species. Do-hoon learned to avoid the prince. When they crossed paths in the corridors, Do-hoon kept his eyes down and his mouth shut. He was walking on the edge of a blade, and one wrong step would send him tumbling into the darkness. But even avoiding the prince was not enough. One night, Do-hun woke to find his door open and three figures standing in his room. They wore black masks and carried knives, assassins. Do-hun did not have time to think. He rolled off the bed as the first knife came down, missing his head by inches. He grabbed the lamp from his bedside table and swung it hard, catching one assassin across the face. The man stumbled back, cursing in a language Do-hun did not know. The second assassin grabbed Do-hun's arm and twisted. Pain exploded through his shoulder. Do-hun kicked out blindly, connecting with something soft. The grip loosened. He broke free and ran for the door. The third assassin blocked his path. Do-hun saw the knife rising, saw his death reflected in the cold metal, and knew he could not escape. Then the assassin's head snapped to the side, and he crumpled to the floor. A woman stood behind him, holding a heavy metal rod. She was human, middle-aged, with short gray hair and eyes like iron. She wore the uniform of a palace laborer, but she moved like a soldier. "Come with me," she said. "Now." Do-hun did not argue. He followed her through the dark corridors, away from his room, away from the assassins who were surely raising the alarm. They did not stop until they reached a small storage closet deep in the palace's lower levels. "Who are you?" Do-hun gasped. "My name is Choi Mira," the woman said. "Before the conquest, I was a special forces operative. Now I am a laborer, like all of us. But I have been watching you, Kang Do-hun. You are important, too important to die in your sleep." "Important? I am just an advisor. You are the first human with the Queen's ear." Mira's eyes bore into his. "You are the first crack in the wall. If you die, the crack heals. If you live, it grows." Do-hun slumped against the wall. His shoulder throbbed. His heart was still racing. "Prince Taewon sent them, didn't he?" "Probably, maybe someone else. It does not matter. What matters is that you cannot protect yourself alone." Mira folded her arms. "You need training. You need allies. You need to learn that being important means being a target." "I did not ask to be important. No one ever does." Mira stepped closer. "But you are. So the question is simple. Will you learn to survive, or will you die the next time assassins come for you?" Do-hun closed his eyes. He thought of Queen Yuna, of her dream of changing the empire. He thought of the humans who were counting on him without even knowing his name. "Teach me," he said. Mira smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a soldier preparing for war. "Good," she said. "We start tomorrow." He had imagined learning to fight with weapons, to move like the assassins who had tried to kill him. Instead, Mira taught him something more valuable: how to survive without fighting at all. "You will never beat a Valen in combat," she told him on their first night. They were in an abandoned section of the maintenance tunnels, far from any guards or cameras. "They are faster, stronger, and have 4 eyes that see in the dark. If you fight them, you die. So do not fight." "Then what do I do?" "You run. You hide. You use your brain instead of your fists." Mira handed him a small knife, barely larger than his finger. "This is for emergencies. If you ever have to use it, you have already failed." So Do-hun learned to run. He learned to hide. He memorized every tunnel, every corridor, every hidden passage in the palace. He learned which doors could be locked and which could be broken. He learned where the guards patrolled and when they changed shifts. The palace became a map in his mind, and he could navigate it blindfolded. But Mira taught him more than just survival. She introduced him to the network. The network was a secret organization of humans working throughout the palace. Cleaners, cooks, laborers, maintenance workers. They had no weapons, no resources, no power. But they had information. They watched and listened and remembered everything they saw. Every conversation between nobles, every document left on a desk, every secret meeting in the gardens. The network collected it all and shared it quietly, carefully, one whisper at a time. "Knowledge is our only weapon," Mira explained. "The Valen do not notice us because they do not think we matter. They speak freely in front of slaves because they believe we are too stupid to understand. They are wrong." Do-hun became part of the network. He was not a leader or a spy. He was simply another set of eyes and ears, gathering information and passing it along. But his position as the Queen's advisor gave him access to places other humans could not reach. He saw things that no one else could see, and what he saw made him angry. The corruption in the empire was worse than he had imagined. Valen overseers were not just stealing food from human labor camps. They were selling humans themselves, trading them on black markets, working them to death in illegal mines and factories. Hundreds of thousands of humans had simply disappeared from official records, their fates unknown. The empire did not care. Slaves were replaceable. There were always more. Dohun brought his findings to Queen Yuna. He showed her the evidence, the numbers, the names of the overseers responsible. He expected her to be surprised, but she was not. "I knew there was corruption," she said quietly. "I did not know it was this extensive." "It is happening right now," Dohun said. "Humans are dying while we sit here and talk." "And what would you have me do?" Queen Yuna turned to face him. Her golden eyes were sad, tired. "I am the youngest daughter. I have no army, no authority, no real power. My father rules this empire with an iron hand, and my brother waits in the shadows for his chance to take the throne. If I accuse the overseers openly, they will deny it. If I push too hard, I will be removed from the court. And then who will help your people?" Dohun felt his anger draining away. He knew she was right. He knew the politics were complicated, but knowing did not make it easier. "There must be something," he said. Queen Yuna was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled just slightly. "There is, but it requires patience and proof that cannot be denied." So Dohun gathered proof. He spent months documenting the corruption, building a case so solid that even the emperor could not ignore it. He tracked shipments of stolen supplies. He identified the overseers involved. He mapped the network of bribes and lies that kept the system running. And when he was ready, he brought everything to Queen Yuna. The trial was held in the palace's great hall. Overseers from across the sector were summoned to answer charges of theft and abuse. They stood before the emperor, confident that their connections would protect them. They expected a slap on the wrist, perhaps a small fine. They did not expect to die. Queen Yuna presented Dohun's evidence. She spoke calmly, clearly, without emotion. She showed the stolen supplies, the falsified records, the testimonies of human slaves who had witnessed the crimes. The overseers tried to interrupt, to deny, to blame their subordinates. But the evidence was overwhelming. The emperor listened in silence. When Queen Yuna finished, he turned to the overseers. His masked face revealed nothing. "You have stolen from the empire," he said. "You have weakened our systems. You have dishonored your positions. The penalty is death." 47 overseers were executed that day. Their bodies were displayed at the palace gates as a warning to others. It was the largest purge of corrupt officials in decades, and it had been triggered by a human slave. Word spread through the network. Dohun's name was whispered in labor camps across 100 worlds. The human with the queen's ear, the one who had brought justice. Hope, that dangerous thing, began to bloom. But hope brought danger too. The assassination attempts increased. Poison in Dohun's food. Accidents during inspections. Mysterious figures following him through the corridors. Queen Yuna assigned Valen guards to protect him. But Dohun knew he could not rely on aliens to keep him safe. The network was his true protection. The watchers and whisperers who warned him of danger before it arrived. And then there was Prince Taewon. The prince had been quiet since the trial. Too quiet. Dohun had expected rage, threats, perhaps another wave of assassins. Instead, Taewon simply watched. He attended court meetings and smiled at his sister. He spoke politely to Dohun when they crossed paths. He acted like a man without enemies. It was terrifying. "He is planning something," Dohun told Mira one night. "I can feel it." "Of course he is planning something," Mira replied. "Taiwan is next in line for the throne. Your success is his failure. Every time you help the queen, you make her stronger and him weaker. He cannot allow that to continue. So what do? We prepare." Mira's eyes were hard. "The network has been watching the prince for months. He is careful, but he is not perfect. Sooner or later, he will make a mistake. When he does, we must be ready." Dohun nodded. He understood. The game was no longer about surviving day to day. It was about preparing for a battle that would decide the fate of humanity. Months passed. Dohun continued his work with Queen Yuna, pushing for reforms, fighting for small victories. New regulations protected humans from the worst abuses. Food supplies to labor camps improved. Children were allowed to learn basic skills instead of being thrown into the mines at age 10. None of it was enough, but it was progress. And through it all, Do-hun and Queen Yuna grew closer. They spent long hours together, discussing politics and philosophy, sharing stories of their worlds. Do-hun told her about Earth, about the blue oceans and green forests, about the music and art and love that humans had created over thousands of years. Queen Yuna told him about the Valen, about the ancient traditions and hidden kindness that existed beneath the Empire's cruel surface. They were not friends. They were not equals. But they were partners, bound together by a shared dream of something better. One evening, as they watched the sunset from the palace gardens, Queen Yuna asked a question that surprised him. "Do you still hate us?" Do-hun considered the question carefully. "I hate what your people did to Earth. I hate what they did to my mother, my friends, my world. I hate the suffering that humans endure every day." He paused. "But I do not hate you. You are different." "Am I?" Queen Yuna looked at him. "I am still Valen. I still benefit from the empire my ancestors built. Every comfort I enjoy comes from the labor of people like you." "Yes," Do-hun said, "but you are trying to change it. You are trying to make things better. That matters." Queen Yuna was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached out and took his hand. Her skin was cool and smooth, unlike anything human, but the gesture was warm. "I will not fail you," she said. "No matter what comes, I will not stop fighting." Do-hun believed her, and for the first time since the conquest, he allowed himself to imagine a future where that fight might actually be won. But far away in the shadows of the palace, Prince Taiwan was finalizing his plans. The time for patience was over. The time for blood had come. Do-hun was eating breakfast in his quarters when the doors burst open. A dozen guards flooded the room, their shock sticks crackling with energy. Behind them strode Prince Taiwan, his face calm and cold as stone. "Kang Do-hun," the prince said, "you are under arrest for treason against the Valen Empire." Do-hun's bowl slipped from his hands and shattered on the floor. "Treason? I have done nothing." "You have been communicating with human rebels on the outer worlds," Taiwan interrupted. "You have been feeding them information about palace security. You have been plotting to assassinate my father." The prince smiled. It did not reach his eyes. "Did you think we would not discover your network of spies?" The guards grabbed Do-hun before he could respond. They bound his hands behind his back and dragged him from the room. He did not struggle. He knew it would only make things worse. They took him to the palace dungeons, a place Do-hun had never seen before. The cells were deep underground, carved into the rock, completely dark and silent. They threw him into a cage barely large enough to stand and left him there without food, without water, without light. Hours passed, maybe days. Do-hun lost track of time. He sat in the darkness and tried to think, to understand what had happened. Taiwan had accused him of communicating with rebels. That was a lie. There were no organized human rebels, not in any real sense. The network gathered information, but they did not fight. They did not plot. They survived. But lies did not need to be true to be deadly. In Valen politics, an accusation was enough. All Taiwan needed was evidence that looked convincing, and the prince had months to prepare his trap. When the guards finally came for Do-hun, they did not take him to a courtroom. They took him to a small chamber where two Valen waited with instruments of pain. Interrogation. They wanted him to confess, to confirm the lies, to give them names and details they could use against Queen Yuna. Do-hun refused. The pain was unlike anything he had experienced before. The Valen had machines that could burn nerves without leaving marks, that could make every cell in a body scream with agony while the victim remained completely conscious. Do-hun screamed until his voice gave out. He begged for death, but he did not confess. "I have nothing to confess," he whispered through cracked lips. "I am not a rebel. I am not a spy. I am a maintenance worker who was given a chance to help my people. That is all." The interrogators did not believe him. They continued for what felt like eternities, but eventually they stopped. Taiwan needed a public confession, and torture alone would not provide one. The prince would have to find another way. Dohun was dragged back to his cell. He lay on the cold stone, unable to move, unable to think, waiting for whatever came next. And then a voice spoke from the darkness. Dohun! He forced his eyes open. A figure stood outside his cage, hidden in shadow. The voice was human, female, familiar. Mira, do not speak, just listen. Mira's voice was barely a whisper. The trial is tomorrow. Taewon has fabricated evidence, forged communications between you and a rebel leader who does not exist, testimony from human prisoners who will say whatever the prince wants to stop their own pain. The emperor has already been convinced. If you are found guilty, you and Queen Yuna will both be executed. Dohun felt his heart stop. Yuna? She is accused too? Taewon claims she was part of the conspiracy, that she used her position to help you spy for the rebels. He is removing both threats at once. Mira paused. The queen is under house arrest. She cannot help you. She cannot even speak in her own defense. Then it is over. No. Mira's hand reached through the bars and touched his face. It is not over. The network has been watching Taewon. We know things he thinks are secret, things that could destroy him if exposed. Dohun struggled to focus through the pain. What things? Taewon is not just framing his sister. He is planning a coup. The accusations against you are a distraction. While the court focuses on your trial, Taewon's soldiers are moving into position. He plans to kill his father and seize the throne before anyone realizes what is happening. The words hit Dohun like a physical blow. A coup. Taewon was going to murder the emperor, and if he succeeded, humans would suffer worse than ever before. The prince hated them with a passion that bordered on madness. Under his rule, there would be no reforms, no protections, no hope, just endless suffering until humanity was extinct. How do you know this? Dohun asked. The network has eyes everywhere. Taewon thinks he is clever, but he still treats human servants as invisible. They have heard his plans, seen his preparations, recorded everything. Mira's voice hardened. We have proof of his treachery, but we cannot use it ourselves. We are slaves. Our word means nothing. Then what can we do? You, Mira said. You can do something. In Valen law, an accused person has the right to speak in their own defense, the right of final words. If you survive until the trial, you can present evidence. You can expose Taewon's plot before he can carry it out. Dohun laughed bitterly. How? I cannot even stand. They will execute me before I finish speaking. You will stand. Mira's voice was iron. You will speak, and you will be ready, because the network will be there. We will get you the evidence. We will protect you as long as we can. But when the moment comes, you must be strong enough to act. Dohun closed his eyes. The pain was still there, pulsing through every nerve. But underneath it, something else stirred. Anger, determination, the stubborn human refusal to give up. I thought you said we should not fight, he whispered, that we should run and hide. This is different, Mira stood. This is not a fight we can avoid. If Taewon takes the throne, humanity is finished. We have no choice but to act. She began to move away. Rest now. Save your strength. Tomorrow will decide everything. Dohun spent the night in darkness, alone with his pain and his fear. He thought about his mother, lost somewhere in the empire. He thought about the humans in labor camps, the children who would never see freedom. He thought about Queen Yuna, trapped in her own prison, waiting for a death she did not deserve. And he made a decision. He would not die quietly. He would not accept Taewon's lies. He would fight with the only weapon he had left, the truth. When morning came, the guards dragged Dohun from his cell and brought him to the Great Hall. It was filled with nobles, officials, and dignitaries from across the empire. The emperor sat on his throne, his golden mask gleaming in the light. Prince Taewon stood nearby, calm and confident, and in a small section of the hall guarded by soldiers, Queen Yuna waited in chains. She looked at Dohun. Their eyes met. In that moment, he saw something in her golden gaze that surprised him. Not fear, not despair, trust. She trusted him. Despite everything, Despite the chains and the accusations and the coming death, she trusted him to find a way. Dohun straightened his broken body. He took a breath, and as the trial began, he prepared to fight for the future of his people. The prince thought he had already won. He was wrong. This human, he said, pointing at Dohun, has betrayed the empire that gave him mercy. He has used his position to spy for rebel forces. He has plotted the assassination of our beloved emperor. And my sister, Queen Yuna, blinded by her strange fascination with these creatures, helped him every step of the way. The nobles murmured in agreement. They had never accepted Dohun's presence in the palace. Now they had permission to hate him openly. Taewon presented his evidence: forged communications, falsified records, human prisoners who spoke in dead voices, their spirits broken by torture, saying whatever the prince demanded. It was all lies, but the lies were convincing. The emperor listened without expression, his masked face revealing nothing. When Taewon finished, he turned to the throne. "Father, the evidence is clear. I ask for the traditional punishment, death for the traitors, and the cleansing of the human infestation from our palace." The emperor raised his hand. "The accused have the right of final words. Let them speak." Taewon's jaw tightened, but he stepped back. Valen law was absolute. Even the emperor's son could not override it. Dohun stepped forward. His legs trembled. His body screamed with pain from the torture. But he forced himself to stand straight, to meet the eyes of the nobles who wanted him dead. "I am Kang Dohun," he said, "a maintenance worker, a slave, a human. I have no army. I have no power. I have nothing except the truth." "Lies," Taewon spat. "He will say anything to save himself." "Will I?" Dohun turned to face the prince. "Then let me tell you what I know, Prince Taewon. Let me tell you what the invisible slaves in your palace have seen and heard." The hall went quiet. Something in Dohun's voice had changed. It was no longer the voice of a frightened prisoner. It was the voice of a man with nothing left to lose. "You accuse me of plotting against the emperor," Dohun continued, "but the true plotter stands before us now. For months, Prince Taewon has been gathering loyal soldiers, moving them into position around the palace, preparing for a coup that will put him on the throne over his father's dead body." The nobles erupted in shock. Taewon's face twisted with fury. "This is absurd. He has no proof." "Do I not?" Dohun looked toward the edges of the hall. "The humans who serve in this palace are invisible to you. We clean your rooms, serve your food, scrub your floors. You speak freely in front of us because you believe we are too stupid to understand. But we understand everything, and we remember." On cue, a dozen human servants stepped forward from the shadows. They carried small devices that Mira had smuggled into the palace. Recording devices, memory chips, evidence that could not be forged. "These are recordings of Prince Taewon's private meeting," Dohun said. "Conversations with his commanders about troop movements. Plans to isolate the emperor during today's trial. Orders to kill anyone who resists the change of power." The devices activated. Taewon's voice filled the hall, cold and clear, discussing the murder of his own father. The details were specific, undeniable. The nobles listened in horrified silence. Even the emperor leaned forward on his throne. "Lies!" Taewon screamed. "These are fabrications. The humans have manufactured this evidence." "Have we?" Dohun pointed at the prince. "Then explain why your soldiers are surrounding the Great Hall right now. Explain why your commanders are waiting for your signal. Explain why you plan to seal the doors the moment my execution was announced." Taewon's face went pale. He had not expected this. He had not expected a human slave to unravel months of careful planning in a single speech. "Guards!" the prince shouted. "Seize this human! Execute him now!" Some guards moved to obey. Others hesitated. The evidence was too clear, too damning. The emperor had not given the order. And then everything happened at once. The doors of the Great Hall burst open. Soldiers loyal to Taewon flooded inside, weapons drawn. The coup was happening now, right here, in front of the entire court. Taewon had no choice but to act. "Kill the emperor!" Taewon screamed. "Kill anyone who resists! The throne is mine!" Chaos erupted. Nobles fled in every direction. Guards clashed with Taewon's soldiers. The air filled with the sound of weapons firing and bodies falling. Do-hun did not hesitate. He pushed through the crowd toward Queen Yuna. She was still chained, still guarded, but her guards were distracted by the fighting. Mira appeared beside him, a stolen weapon in her hand. "This way," she said. "We have to get her out." They reached Queen Yuna's position. The guards turned to stop them, but Mira was faster. She took down two before they could react. Do-hun grabbed the keys from a fallen guard and freed Yuna's chains. "Can you walk?" he asked. "Yes." Queen Yuna's golden eyes blazed with determination. "But we cannot run. Not yet. We have to stop my brother." "How? He has an army." "He has soldiers in the palace," Yuna said, "but the Loyalist fleet is in orbit. If we can reach the communications center, I can broadcast to the entire empire. I can call for help." It was insane. The communications center was on the other side of the palace, through corridors filled with fighting. They would have to cross a war zone with no weapons, no armor, no protection. But there was no other choice. Do-hun led the way. He knew the palace better than any Velen alive. Every tunnel, every hidden passage, every forgotten doorway. He guided Queen Yuna and Mira through the darkness while the battle raged above them. They encountered Taewon's soldiers twice. Both times Mira handled them while Do-hun and Yuna slipped past. The woman fought like a demon, using every trick she had learned in a lifetime of war. Finally, they reached the communications center. It was unguarded. Taewon's forces were focused on the throne room, on the emperor. They had not expected anyone to reach this far. Queen Yuna activated the broadcast system. Her image appeared on every screen in the empire, from the palace to the farthest colony world. "I am Queen Yuna of the Valen Empire," she said. "My brother, Prince Taewon, has launched a treasonous coup against our father. He has attacked the palace, killed loyal guards, and attempted to seize the throne by force. I call upon all loyal forces to respond. Stop the traitor, protect the emperor, save the empire." The message went out across the stars. Within minutes, responses began flooding in. Fleet commanders declaring loyalty, colonial governors pledging support, Taewon's allies abandoning him as they realized the coup had failed. In the throne room, the fighting stopped. Taewon's soldiers threw down their weapons as loyalist forces arrived. The prince himself was captured, dragged before his father in chains. The emperor was wounded but alive. Taewon's assassins had been stopped before they could finish their work. The coup was over. Do-hun watched from the doorway as Prince Taewon was brought before the throne. The prince's face was twisted with hatred. He looked at his sister, at the human slave who had destroyed him, and his eyes burned with fury. "You will regret this," Taewon hissed at Do-hun. "You and all your kind. This is not over." "It is for you," Queen Yuna said. She stood beside her father, tall and calm, her silver skin catching the light. "By Valen law, your fate belongs to the one you tried to destroy. Father, I claim the right of judgment." The emperor nodded slowly. He was weak from blood loss, but his voice was steady. "The right is yours, daughter." Queen Yuna looked at her brother. For a long moment, she said nothing. The entire court waited. "Execution is traditional," she finally said. "But I will not start my rule with my brother's blood on my hands. Prince Taewon is sentenced to exile. He will be sent to the prison world of Ashkar, where he will spend the rest of his life in isolation. His name will be struck from the royal records. He is no longer my brother." Taewon screamed in rage as the guards dragged him away. Exile was worse than death for a Valen prince. It meant oblivion, forgotten by history, erased from existence. When the screaming faded, the emperor spoke. "You saved my life," he said to his daughter. "You and your human." He looked at Do-hun, and for the first time, there was something like respect in his ancient eyes. "Perhaps I underestimated your judgment, Yuna. Perhaps I underestimated all humans." Queen Yuna bowed. "Thank you, father." The emperor closed his eyes. "I am old. I am tired. This wound may be my last." He reached out and took his daughter's hand. "The empire needs new strength, new vision. I name you my heir, Yuna. When I am gone, you will rule." The nobles gasped, the youngest daughter chosen over all others. It was unprecedented, but no one objected, not after what they had witnessed. Do-hun stood in the shadows, watching history unfold. He was exhausted, broken, barely able to stay on his feet. But he felt something he had never expected to feel again: pride. A human slave had helped bring down a prince. A human slave had helped save an empire. And this was only the beginning. His wounds had been too severe, his body too old. He passed quietly in his sleep, surrounded by his remaining children and the advisors who had served him for decades. The empire mourned as required, holding ceremonies and rituals that lasted for weeks. And then Yuna took the throne. Empress Yuna, the first ruler in Valen history to have a human at her side during her coronation. Dohun stood in the great hall, wearing robes of silver and black, his head held high as his queen became his empress. The nobles watched with mixed emotions. Some admired what had happened. Others burned with resentment. But none could deny the reality before them. The galaxy had changed. The Empress's first official act surprised everyone. She did not announce new conquests or military campaigns. She did not promise to expand the empire's borders or crush its enemies. Instead, she created a position that had never existed before. Voice of humanity. Dohun was no longer an advisor. He was not a slave or a subject. He was a representative, equal in legal status to any Valen noble. He could speak in the Empress's council. He could propose laws and policies. He could stand before the entire court and demand justice for his people. The symbolism shook the empire to its core. "This is insanity," one noble whispered during the announcement. "A human with the rank of a lord? The ancestors will curse us." But the Empress simply smiled. The ancestors conquered 100 species and built an empire that spans galaxies. I doubt they will be troubled by one human who helped save their legacy. The reforms began slowly. Yuna understood that change could not happen overnight. The empire was too vast, too old, too set in its ways. If she pushed too hard, too fast, she would face rebellion. So she moved carefully, one step at a time. Labor camps were converted to settlements. Humans were still required to work, but they received fair payment, medical care, and protection from abuse. The overseers who had tortured and killed with impunity now faced punishment for their crimes. The message was clear. Humans were no longer disposable. Human children were allowed education for the first time since the conquest. Not Valen schools, not yet, but human teachers, carefully monitored, teaching human children to read, to write, to dream of something better than endless labor. Human culture was no longer forbidden. The songs that Dohun had hummed in the tunnels could now be sung openly. The stories of Earth, the memories of a lost world, could be shared without fear. Humans gathered in small communities, rebuilding the pieces of their identity that the conquest had tried to destroy. None of it was enough. Dohun knew that. Millions of humans still suffered across the empire. Generations would pass before true equality was even possible. The wounds of the conquest would take centuries to heal. But it was a beginning. Dr. Park Yoonji lived long enough to see the changes start. She died peacefully in her quarters, surrounded by the human doctors she had trained. Her last words were a request that her body be buried on Earth, in the soil of her ancestors. Empress Yuna granted the request. A ship carried Dr. Park's remains across the stars, to the blue planet that had been silent for so long. Humans from across the empire sent messages to accompany her, stories and songs and prayers in 100 different languages. Dohun watched the ship depart from the palace gardens. Mira stood beside him, her iron eyes softer than he had ever seen them. "She started this," Mira said. "That old woman with her clever words. She gave us a chance." "She gave us more than that," Dohun replied. "She showed us that we could still fight, that we were not defeated, that humans never truly surrender." Mira smiled. It was a rare expression on her face. "What do we do now?" Dohun considered the question. What did they do now? The network still existed, watching and waiting. Humans still needed protection, still needed advocates, still needed someone to fight for their future. The work was far from finished. "We keep going," he said. "We build the network stronger. We train the next generation. We make sure that, when I am gone, there are others to take my place." The voice of humanity. Not just one voice. Thousands, millions. Every human in this empire. Speaking together until the Valen cannot ignore us anymore. Mira nodded. She looked out at the stars, at the distant lights of the ships that carried humans to new settlements, to new lives. It will take a long time. Humans are patient, Do-hun said. We have survived 5 years of conquest. We will survive 500 years of change. That evening, Empress Yuna summoned Do-hun to her private chambers. It was the first time they had spoken alone since her coronation. The weight of her new position had kept her busy, surrounded by advisors and officials at every moment. She looked tired. The golden eyes that had once seemed so alien now seemed almost familiar. Do-hun realized that he knew her face better than any other in the galaxy. "How are you?" he asked. Yuna smiled. "Exhausted, overwhelmed. Terrified that I will fail and doom everyone I am trying to save." She poured 2 glasses of something that smelled sweet and strange. In other words, the same as always. They sat together by the window, watching the alien sunset paint the sky in colors that had no names in any human language. "Do you regret it?" Yuna asked. "Saving us? Saving me?" Do-hun remembered Mira asking him the same question months ago. His answer was still the same. "No," he said. "I regret nothing. You gave me a chance to help my people. All I had to do was take it." "I did not save you in that corridor," Yuna said. "I remember thinking that, wondering if you knew. You saved yourself, Do-hun. You saved everyone. I just gave you the opportunity." Do-hun shook his head. "You saw something in a tunnel worker that no one else saw. Not the overseers, not the nobles, not even the other humans. You looked at a slave and saw a person. You are not a slave anymore." "No, but I remember what it was like. I will never forget." They sat in silence for a long moment. Outside, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. Ships moved between them, carrying goods and people across the vast distances of the Empire. "What do you see when you look at the future?" Yuna asked. Do-hun thought about the question. He saw challenges and dangers. He saw enemies who would never accept the changes, who would fight against progress with every weapon they had. He saw centuries of work, generations of struggle, battles that would be won and lost by people whose names he would never know. But he also saw hope. "I see humans standing beside Valen as equals," he said. "I see children who never knew the conquest, who grow up in a galaxy where their species has value. I see Earth, restored and green, welcoming her children home." He looked at Yuna. "I see an empress who kept her promises." Yuna reached out and took his hand. Her skin was cool against his, silver against brown. 2 species, 2 worlds, bound together by something stronger than conquest. "Then let us build that future," she said, "together." Far below the palace, in the gardens where Do-hun had once hidden from assassins, a group of human children played in the fading light. Their laughter drifted up through the evening air, the first innocent sound the palace had heard in years. One of the children looked up at the stars and asked her teacher a question. "Will we ever go home? To Earth?" The teacher, an elderly man who remembered the blue skies and green hills, smiled gently. "Maybe someday," he said, "but right now, we are making a new home, a better home, one that nobody can take from us." The child nodded, satisfied with the answer. She ran back to join her friends, chasing fireflies that glowed with alien colors. Do-hun watched them from the balcony above. Mira joined him, and together they stood in comfortable silence as the night deepened around them. "The Empire asked her to choose a reward," Mira said quietly. "Yes. And she chose you, a maintenance worker from the tunnels." Do-hun smiled. It was a real smile, the kind he had forgotten how to make during the years of darkness. "She chose hope. I just happened to be the form it took." Mira laughed softly. "Humans. We always did have a talent for stubborn survival." "Humanity," Do-hun said. "We never know when to give up." Below, the children's laughter continued, rising like music into the alien night. And somewhere in the distance, beyond the stars and the silence, the blue planet called Earth waited for her children to return. The conquest had ended. The future had begun.